Our next presenter, we're going to kind of stick with research here. We're going to go to Tobias Schwoerer from International Arctic Research Center at UAF. And the title of his talk, Batten Down the Hatches, Biological Invasion Risk of Dreissenid Mussels, Alaska Fisheries. So it looks like I see the presentation now. And Toby, you can take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Excited to present some recent research that's been happening thanks to the generous support from the Fish and Wildlife Service and in collaboration with Ginny Fay, Aaron Martin, Eric Schoen, Tamara Davis, and Mike Buncher. And we looked at kind of the pathways for potentially bringing in Dreissenid mussels into the state, focused on watercraft movement, coming up from the Alcan through land transport and also marine transport. Let's see. Can you see the presentation? I think so. Shared the correct screen. Okay. I want you to go over what we know and what we don't know that kind of guided this research, and then what we did, the methods to come to some results of estimates for watercrafts that are coming from the most concerning states in Lower 48 in the Canadian provinces, and then what we can do about it, kind of the policy angle of our research. Just to give a little bit of background, what we're really facing, or we believe what we're facing, is what, similar to Lower 48, has been faced when it comes to mussels, mussel introduction. This is just a little graph of what previous research in the Hudson River looked at, the changes to the local food web, and through phytoplankton and zooplankton changes in abundance, and what that would mean for the kind of potential fisheries for, in an area. And it's certainly most concerning in Alaska is how it would affect, our aquatic resources, besides other effects on hydropower facilities who frequently have clogged pipes that need to be maintained. And certainly our fisheries are our biggest concern, and to the irreversible food web changes. And obviously those are uncertain, as many of invasive species impacts in Alaska are uncertain. So uncertainty and irreversibility are certainly aspects that economists look at when it comes to later policy, and I'll come to that later. Again, it's just a reminder, it takes just one boat. In 2019, the Fish and Wildlife Service has done preliminary inspections as well in 2017, 18, 20, and 21. And in 2019, this sailboat showed up, and some of you have seen this picture probably. Mussel encrusted sailboat showed up that needed to be decontaminated. We know from inspection data that the Fish and Wildlife Service collected at the border, the Alcan border, that about 30% of the watercrafts that are coming in through the border at the Alcan are coming from mussel-infested states, or from states that have other aquatic invasive species of concern, such as the mud snail, New Zealand mud snail. And this really shows us we're globally linked, we're globally connected, or at least in North America, very connected, and watercrafts are showing up in our waters from these areas. And also on average, which was really surprising, is 70% of the watercrafts that are arriving have not been inspected en route to Alaska, which is really a concern and justifies, I think, action on our hand to take our matters in our own hands to get our own defensive mechanisms built up. And more to that later. This map really shows you what we know and what we don't know. We don't know primarily the marine cargo pathways, where we know people ship their watercraft when they buy them in the Lower 48 on eBay and through other venues or other brokers. They're being shipped on the Alaska Marine Highway system. They're being shipped to the marine cargo companies may they be the big ships or the barges, and they're ending up in or coming through ports in southeastern ports all along the coast. And then obviously, as already discussed, we know that about 344 motorized watercraft are coming in through on average coming in through the border, of which 248 are used. 90 are from mussel-infested regions of the lower 48 and Canadian provinces, and about 52 we estimate will end up in our freshwater systems. So what we did was just we interpolated data that we had from the Fish and Wildlife Service through the inspection data, and we looked at seasonality through vehicle counts. We looked at registrations of boats. Unfortunately, we only had 1 year, or actually in a 1 year snapshot of the registrations from the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and we couldn't really look at what annually was being registered, but we looked at what all of the boats currently in Alaska are, where are they from, where did they come from initially. Then we did interviews to kind of triangulate the information, the data sources that we had to kind of cross-validate. And we talked to marine cargo companies, the Alaska Marine Highway System, and the boat brokers, triangulated that for validation purposes, and then came up with kind of an estimate of what may end up in freshwater based on photo surveys we've done in 2018. We know pretty much what proportion of boats will end up in our freshwater versus marine waters. So the Alcan data, really, the interpolation shows you that, to be expected pre-pandemic, we had much more watercraft coming in compared to recent years. And so we picked the 2017 year as the year we wanted to really look at, because that was the year we also had registration data from. And that registration data tells us that, again, about what the inspection data showed, about 30 to 35% of the boats that are currently in Alaska and registered in Alaska came originally used from a state of known zebra and quagga mussel infestations. The top states there are California, Arizona, Minnesota, Michigan, Texas, and so it's quite alarming, the amount of watercraft that we currently have in Alaska from those states, used watercraft being imported. And so putting it all together, we really see that through marine cargo and through the land-based transports, we have about 74 boats a year that are showing up that have been previously used in mussel-infested waters and are likely showing up in our freshwater systems. And our analysis also showed that the predominant amount of used watercraft are coming through the Alcan. So having inspections there is certainly a first step, but it also shows where our ports are really open to anything right now. We don't have any defenses or prevention mechanisms there right now. So if we don't take action on those open ports, it'll certainly lead to eventually making one boat, or maybe already did, some mussel-infested boats coming our way, potentially uncertain and irreversible damage. If we take immediate action from a policy perspective, that would lead to immediate benefits, because we do reduce the propical pressure. The efficacy of decontamination and inspection is really high. And economically, prevention is the #1 thing to do in this case. And what we currently spend on prevention, though, some of my previous research shows in this table, studies that I've done in 2014 with data between 2007 and 2011 really shows that outreach and prevention is not our #1 expense. Our #1 expense currently probably still is research and monitoring, but outreach and prevention really I would suggest would be a priority. We need to make a priority in order to prevent some future damage of some really horrific invaders that could make it here. And the way to do prevention most effectively is really to do a combined approach with education and outreach and inspection and decontamination. And that comprehensive approach is really based on outreach and education. And that needs to focus on the three boaters, the ones that comply, that's about a third, and then there's another third that doesn't comply at all, and there's another third who complies once in a while. Also needs to be considering availability of boat washing and of having those best practices be maintained, and really the trust being built in our boating public is really important, and facilitating it and not only creating awareness, but really build the skills up in our boating public, so that they feel emboldened and empowered to actually do the right steps to prevent. Because I think it's in their best interest to keep our aquatic resources the high quality that we currently enjoy. And it really, outreach and education really is it enables them and be willing to comply with best practices. And inspections, inspection and decontamination is obviously costly. And research in Lower 48 looked at the willingness to pay of boaters to do something about that. And it's currently around $10 per boat per year. That would, in Alaska, achieve an accumulated amount of about $500,000. And according to latest research by the Bureau of Reclamation that looked at inspection station costs around the country, the $500,000 is certainly a really reasonable budget that would support additional inspection stations around the state. Where we would locate those is another question. We can learn from studies in BC, which is similar to Alaska, has a few high traffic areas where boats are coming through, and it's very applicable. And their research found that if you have a limited budget, evenly spread the budget across your ports of entry and your efforts in a budget constrained situation. So concluding, we do have a significant watercraft trade and traffic risk for transmitting aquatic invasive species, some of the most harmful ones. We need to do something about it. The most economically efficient way to go about it is a comprehensive prevention program that are outlined, and it's been proven to be very cost effective elsewhere in the country. And the lessons learned elsewhere are really applicable to Alaska, and we don't start to reinvent the wheel here. We can really go cut right to the chase. Anyway, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, thanks for your continued efforts in invasive species research and getting at these questions that I think a lot of us don't think about enough. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm looking for questions in the chat. You're just getting compliments on your work and adding to people's anxiety, I guess. Is what was stated here by Doug. But yeah, it's very informative, very forward-thinking, good prevention work. So thanks again. And we're right on time, so I think we will move to our next speaker. So thank you, Toby.
Or whether the research has been shared with policymakers, not yet. It's just in the internal review process, and we're in the process of submitting it to a journal, and that it will come with an outreach campaign, hopefully.